What is the ceiling and what is the floor for Will Levis in the 2024 season? We're going to dive into this today because this could be the critical factor that determines whether the Titans are good or bad this season. Let's get into it. This is the Music City Audible. Oh, welcome everyone to another episode of the Music City Audible podcast presented by Broadway Sports Media in partnership with 440 Sports. I'm Justin Graver. With me, as always, is Justin, Melo, and Justin. Today, we're going to dive a little bit into the Will Levis question because we've said it a few times. We've never really dove hardcore into it, but we have said multiple times over the last 2 months or so, this Titans season is pretty much dependent on whether or not Will Levis is good or if Will Levis is not so good. So we're going to get into all that today. Justin, how is it going?
Doing well. And more than that, I think let's also take a big picture look at it too, right? Because it's not just going to determine if the 2024 Titans are good or not. It's also going to determine if the 2025, 2026, 2027, this is big, right? It could go one way or the other. And if it goes the wrong way, unfortunately, you're looking at kind of tearing it down again, starting fresh. So massive long-term ramifications at play here.
Yeah, absolutely. But I guess the caveat to that is that if Will Levis is not good this year, then you kind of know what the future holds in terms of it's a new quarterback probably coming in. Now you don't know if that new quarterback's gonna be good or bad. So I guess it still does hold true what you said, but there is that little factor of if Will Levis isn't the guy and he shows this season that he's not the guy, then they're probably replacing him next year. Titans, if you look around early 2025 mock drafts, if you look at the betting markets for, odds to pick in the top 10, in the top 5, all these outlets are projecting that the Titans will have a very high pick. The ESPN put out an article at the end of May using their FPI, Football Power Index, to sort of project and simulate where every team will be picking next season, or I guess next April. And they gave the Titans a 7% chance to earn the number 1 pick, a 36% chance to earn a top 5 pick, and a 65% chance to earn a top 10 pick. They have them currently projected, the Titans, with the number 4 overall pick in 2025. So outside expectations are that Will Levis is I don't know if this is all about Will Levis. It's about how the Titans performed last year. It's about first-year coach and new coaching staff and all that. But overall, the outside world, the media that covers the NFL and the projecting systems like FPI do not expect the Titans to be good. They do not expect, you can sort of assume there, that Will Levis will be good. Does that have any impact on how you view Will Levis going into this season?
No, because without sounding like an asshole, I've probably watched more Will Levis than them, right? I think you and I are probably better equipped to have the Will Levis discussion than they are.
Absolutely.
Now, look, it's safe to say that they're not high on Will Levis. They're not, right? You read a lot of articles that they're not. You find very few articles, mainstream media of people that are high on Will Levis. I think PFF named him to their all breakout team. But for the most part, no, people are low on him. They are.
Yeah, they're low on Will Levis and they're low on the Titans overall. I want to do this, Justin, not to spoil any future plans, but I feel like there is a video we could make at some point in the next 2 months asking if the Titans are the most disrespected team in the NFL. We've talked about this a little bit offline, where just based on all the projections and all the rankings, and you put out an article on Titan Size last week about the pass catching group that PFF ranked, put them outside the top 10. Are the Titans being more disrespected than any other team in the league? That's a conversation I think we can have on another podcast, on another video. So for today, we'll keep the conversation focused on Will Levis. So let's talk through it. Ceiling and floor for the Titans quarterback. Let's start with the floor so we can end this podcast on a positive note, talking about the ceiling, because obviously Titans fans hope that he can reach that ceiling or at least something close to it. So let's talk about the floor. I think the absolute lowest floor and the worst case scenario for the Titans this season is that Mason Rudolph starts games in 2024. That could be because Will Levis gets hurt. And look, I think one of the big concerns when we talk about Will Levis's floor is that he has been a little bit injury prone in his college career and in his 1 season in the NFL so far. In college, he was injured. He had multiple nagging lower body injuries that he was able to play through. So you like the toughness, especially in a sport where everyone's going to get hurt at some point in their career. How well can you manage that pain and those injuries and play through them is definitely an important trait to have. So that's sort of a positive on it. But the downside is, even in his rookie year, and granted it was behind a very porous offensive line, he took a lot of hits. He wasn't really protecting himself when he took off and scrambled. Everyone remembers the play against the Colts where he tried to dive for the first down and like helicoptered right at the line to gain. So he doesn't really protect his body, and he did have to obviously miss the last few games of last season with an injury. He missed most of training camp last year with the quad injury and could hardly play in the preseason. So like we've already seen a little bit of that. So if Mason Rudolph has to start games in the 2024 season, whether it's because Will Levis gets injured or because the Titans just decide he's not performing well enough, that's the absolute floor to me. Do you even think it's a realistic scenario that Mason Rudolph starts for Will Levis non-injury related, that Will Levis gets benched in week 13 because the Titans are 4-10 or 4-9 or something, 4-8? I guess by week 13 they never had their bye. Whatever, you get my point. Is there any chance that Mason Rudolph, that Will Levis gets benched for Mason Rudolph at some point?
No, I don't think there is. I don't. I mean, he'd have to be stunningly bad, right? They're so invested in him right now as their franchise quarterback. He'd have to be stunningly bad, like not a little bad. He'd have to be really, really bad. And I'm glad you brought up the injury thing because you make a lot of good points. But I'll be honest with you, I'm not interested in necessarily having that conversation because we're not there yet. We're not this is Marcus Mariota coming off a broken leg or a weird nerve elbow injury. Like, we're not there. So I'm not even interested in having that conversation. There are plenty of interesting talking points about Will Levis, the quarterback himself, when he's healthy, how he performed last year. There are a lot of interesting metrics that I think we can look at to have that conversation.
Yeah, no doubt about that. I want to get into, when we talk about the floor here, maybe what you might consider to be the statistical floor, and then we'll talk about some concerns we have with Will Levis as a player that could lead to that statistical floor. So a few weeks ago when I did my Titans 2024 offensive stat projections for this team, I looked at the Bengals offense under Brian Callahan for the 5 years he was there, 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023. Obviously, the Bengals had Joe Burrow during that time, but if you follow the NFL closely, you know that he missed a lot of games during that span. In 2019, Joe Burrow was leading LSU to the national championship in college, Brian Callahan's first year as the offensive coordinator with Cincinnati. Andy Dalton was still the starting quarterback for the Bengals, if you can flash back that far back in the past. Even with Andy Dalton at quarterback, the Bengals in 2019 managed 3,600 passing yards. They managed 6.5 yards per attempt, only 57% completion percentage, which is pretty low, but still not the end of the world. 2020, we know Joe Burrow tore his ACL. He actually missed 6 starts that season. The Bengals as a whole, as a team, still managed nearly 3,500 passing yards, 64% completion. And then last year, 2023, we all saw Jake Browning come in and perform at a high level. The total passing stats for the Bengals last year, 3,895 passing yards, so just under 3,900 passing yards, 68.3% completion percentage, 6.9 yards per attempt. Look, those are pretty good numbers overall. I mean, they're not Pro Bowl numbers. They're not elite numbers. They're not maybe what would get you excited about the future of Will Levis. But if we're talking about the floor, even the worst years under Brian Callahan with backup quarterbacks below replacement level quarterbacks like Ryan Finley and Brandon Allen and Jake Browning last year and Andy Dalton in 2019, Bengals offense still moved the ball. Their passing stats were still pretty decent. And we know, based on everything we've read and studied about Brian Callahan, that the Titans are going to be a pass-heavy, pass-centric offense with easy reads for the quarterback to try to make his life easier. We know the Titans have tried to beef up their offensive line. We know they've beefed up their receiving core, their pass catchers overall. So with all of those factors into consideration, the floor for Will Levis, to me, is probably about 3,500 passing yards, probably about 60% completion percentage because there's going to be easier throws in there. He's not going to average the highest depth of target this season like he did last year, and probably around 20 touchdowns. So statistically, what would lead to that floor, and is that floor good enough in your opinion?
I think those numbers are a perfect example of what the floor is statistically. How does he get there? Okay, let's talk about that a little bit, because it's very interesting. I love that you want to pull this in one direction. I'm pulling it in another, but I think together we're giving the listeners the complete picture.
I agree.
So last year he completed 58.4% of his passes. That was the worst mark in the league. Among you can include some minimum qualifiers in there, whatever. Worst mark in the league. He attempted a turnover-worthy play rate of 4.5%. That was the third worst mark in the league, according to Pro Football Focus. By the way, I'm getting a lot of these numbers from a Mike Herndon article. I want to be clear. He wrote What to Expect from Will Levis in early May. If you didn't read it, go read it. Mike, obviously, on our latest episode here, the 53-man roster dueling projection that you and I did with him. But really good article he wrote on Will Levis in early May. So those are some of the numbers that's the floor for Will Levis. That's how he gets to maybe only 3,500 passing yards if he starts all year long. That's how he only gets X amount of touchdowns and X amount of interceptions, because he's attempting 4.5% turnover worthy plays, right? He's near the top of the league.
Right.
That's how he gets to those numbers, which now keep in mind, context important. I'm not going to give you all the analytics from that article. I am going to give you some more. But as Mike Herndon points out, things you already know, or you should know if you watch the Titans, you don't need the numbers. The offensive line was really bad, and the wide receivers were really bad.
Yeah.
Right? Two things that played a role into those numbers. He had little to no help. Even from a wide receiver perspective, the separation rate for them, very, very low. The dropped pass rate, very, very high. Right? Two things. The sack rate, you know about the pressures in the sacks already. So the things that he had to deal with led to some of those numbers, and there's no way they're that bad again, right? Like, there's no way the offensive line, this wide receiver room, outside of just everyone being decimated by injury, it's not going to be that bad. So the difficulty level that he's playing on this year is going to be a lot easier than it was last year.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that, and I'm glad you made those points, because you're expecting all those things to improve this year, but it does raise another concern that I have with, talking about how we can get to the statistical floor, and that is Will Levis's sack percentage and just his general pressure to sack conversion percentage. This is a thing that is a constant debate in the NFL. How much of sacks and pressures are on the quarterback versus on the offensive line? And there's no doubt the Titans' offensive line last year was very bad. And there's no doubt that the offensive line Will Levis played behind in his last year at Kentucky was very bad. But even going back to the season before that, Will Levis has always had a pretty high sack percentage and a pretty high rate of turning pressures into sacks. He's obviously not, a Lamar Jackson or somebody who's going to escape pressure at a super high rate, but even just being an average rate of escaping pressure, even just being, and I'm going to use the GOAT here in comparison, it's just for reference sake, but Tom Brady, never the most athletic, agile, quick, elusive guy, was always great at avoiding pressure and navigating pressure with his subtle pocket movements, his ability to set his offensive lineman up, keep the offensive lineman between him and the pass rush. Will Levis has got to get better in that area. He's got to get better at avoiding sacks, whether it's just getting rid of the ball quickly and throwing it away, not holding it too long, or actually being more elusive in the pocket and escaping some sacks. We did see him escape a sack against the Colts last year in a really impressive way, where he was pretty much wrapped up and he ducks out of the pressure and runs for a first down. But there are also times where he holds the ball too long and just takes that sack because he's looking for the big play. We mentioned his average depth of target last season being the highest in the league. He's got to be more willing to take the layups and to take them quicker, and not be so just like standing statuesque in the pocket, waiting for something big to develop downfield. It was the same problem Ryan Tannehill had. We praise Ryan Tannehill's toughness for standing in the pocket and making those throws down the field in the face of heavy pressure, but it also led to a lot of sacks of Tannehill because he would hold the ball too long. And maybe Will Levis picked up some bad habits studying behind Ryan Tannehill last year. I'm not going to attribute it to that. I'm just going to say he's got to take a big jump in that area this year. And maybe that comes with a better offensive line and pass catchers he can trust, and a coaching staff that is pass first, with a quarterback guru like Brian Callahan who can coach him up on evading pressure, guy who coached Peyton Manning and Matthew Stafford, two guys who have always had pretty low sack rates themselves. So part of that floor to me is that Will Levis doesn't improve in terms of his ability to mitigate sacks. He takes more sacks than he should. That hamstrings the offense, puts you behind the sticks, negative plays. We know how bad that can be for an offense. So that could lead to some of these stats being more depressed than you'd like to see. So that's one of my biggest concerns with Will Levis. You mentioned the turnover-worthy plays. That's another big one, is just making the right read and the right decision. He's got a cannon of an arm. He has incredible arm strength. Sometimes he trusts that arm strength too much. And the last point on that turnover-worthy play is just the general accuracy. I think Will Levis can be extremely accurate with the football, but consistency is a little bit of an issue there. There was a little bit of a hoopla made on Twitter last week when the Titans released that video of Calvin Ridley making the catch over the middle of the field, and the ball from Will Levis was not the best ball. It was a little behind him, a little high. It had a lot of wobble to it. People in the comments on that tweet were calling it a duck. So can he avoid those more often than not? Can he get more consistent with his accuracy, with making the right decision? Those are going to be critical to him having success this year. Obviously, you'd hope that better pass catchers, better offensive line, and a coaching staff that is very committed to passing first and making those passes easier will help lessen the burden on Will Levis to make those tough decisions, to make those accurate throws into tight windows. The less he has to do that, the better the offense is going to be. But he still needs to take a step forward in that area. There's no reason to think he can't do that, going from a rookie year where he's thrown into the fire to a second season. But it's still something we have to see before we can really feel confident.
This is the most interesting part of this conversation to me, okay? And if I'm rambling and you want to cut in at any point, please do like I would do and just interrupt me. Let me know what you think about this, okay? Because this is the most interesting part to me. You talked about the average depth of target, but I want to give the context now, okay? 11.1 yards was his average depth of target last year. By far the highest mark in the league, okay? By far. The last two quarterbacks ever to have an ADOT over 11 in a single season were Matthew Stafford in 2019 and Josh Allen in 2018. Okay? Here's the most fascinating thing to me, okay? Where we talk about Will Levis and Brian Callahan. We talked about how perfect of a fit they're going to be for one another. Here's the pushback on that, okay? No Brian Callahan quarterback in the last 10 years has ever cracked the top 10 in average depth of target. Not one. That's not the Brian Callahan offense, okay?
No, not at
They're
all.
going to put emphasis on the short passing game, okay? And you know what I find even more fascinating about that stat? He had 2 years with Matthew Stafford, who after his departure, Callahan's departure, would go on to average over 11 average depth of target in a single season in 2019, okay? The 2 years that Callahan had Stafford, his ADOT was 7.9 and 8.8. Callahan leaves and it climbs to over 11. Okay? So, and another point I want to make on that, that's why I'm rambling. We talked about excuses a little bit for why Levis's ADOT was so high, right? 11.1. The offensive line, the receivers. Okay. Well, Ryan Tannehill's ADOT last year in the exact same offense, exact same scenario, exact same O-line, all that was 8.4. So proof that there was a different way to quarterback this offense before Will Levis got there. So as much as that stuff didn't help, Will Levis' way was 5.4, according to PFF, was one of the highest in the NFL. That's awesome, but it's also a result of an ADOT that's over 11, right? Like you're going to make some big time throws when your average depth of target is 11.1. So he's got to take some of that blame. He did fall in love with the deep ball. He did. And the ceiling, I'm getting ahead of myself, but what's the ceiling for Will Levis? The conversation we're having is Brian Callahan finding a way to rein some of that in without changing too much who he is, still letting him to be the explosive playmaker that he wants to be, but making sure that ADOT starts falling somewhere between, an 8 and a 9, let's call it, right? Like that's where, because Brian Callahan likes the quick passing game, and there's going to be more opportunities for that in this offense because now they've got receivers that can quickly separate, right? But some of that's going to have to be Will Levis saying, okay, change some of my habits and hit some of those quick hitters as opposed to having a friggin' ADOT that's over 11.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think it's fine that you moved us over to ceiling because it's a good chance for us to transition there. I think we've covered the floor here. The floor is that he's just not good enough to be the Titans starting quarterback going forward. That's like the bottom line of the floor. I think we explained it well how we get there. Before we transition to the ceiling, let's take a minute to thank our sponsor for this episode, Sinkers Beverages in East Nashville and Bluegrass Beverages in Hendersonville. Sinkers Beverages is the premier wine, spirits, and beer store in East Nashville, serving the community since 1985. Their knowledgeable staff is proud to help you with large parties, themed events, or finding something unique for a special occasion. From birthday parties to milestone celebrations to everyday moments, Sinkers can help with the right drink for every occasion. And if you head to the sinkersbeverages.com site or you check the link in this podcast description, you can join the In Crowd. In Crowd members get access to allocated wines and spirits, exclusive events, early access to barrel releases, and more. And while we're on the topic of taking a little break here, let's also thank everyone who has tuned in to this podcast. If you're listening on the audio platforms, we appreciate you. But as I always say, if you're watching on YouTube, we appreciate it even more. Make sure you are subscribed to the Music City Audible podcast channel. Give this video a thumbs up, like, and turn on alerts so you get a notification every time we drop a new video. And again, as we've been saying the last few episodes, we're really loving the discussions that are developing in our comments section. So if you want to join the conversation, drop a comment below. What do you think Will Levis's ceiling and floor is this season? Let us know what you think. Drop them in 2 separate comments. 1 comment for the ceiling, 1 comment for the floor, just so we continue to boost that algorithm, get this podcast in more people's feeds. Share it with your friends. If you're into this podcast and you know Titans fans, send them this show and let them know that you love it, and maybe we'll get some more viewers that way too. So we appreciate everyone there. Justin, funny thing in the comments we talked about last week where the commenter who seemed to prefer maybe the solo pod has given us some clarification in that he didn't actually prefer the solo pod. He said he would have made the same comment if you were hosting the solo pod by yourself. Do you want to respond?
I appreciate it. I dove back into the comments to thank him and say I didn't take it that seriously. I appreciate him and appreciate his listenership and viewership, but I won't be doing a solo pod anytime soon. Here's something that probably won't shock you guys. Graver produces this whole thing. I just bring the stupid opinions and the interruptions. I don't even know how to upload this stupid thing. That's all on Graver. He's a former NFL Network producer, current Fox Sports producer. Like, it shouldn't be a surprise to you that he produces this thing. He uploads it to YouTube. In fact, he went on vacation recently and he taught me how to upload a video to YouTube just in case I had to. We had something in the chamber. So no solo pod coming from me anytime soon. Even if I knew how to do it, to be honest with you, I find them so disinteresting. I want to go back and forth. I don't want to listen to my own voice for 30 minutes. So no solo pod for me, I don't think coming anytime soon. But plenty of Graver and I. You got no concerns. I'm not going anywhere. And soon enough, we'll start doing 2-3 episodes a week probably as the Titans get into training camp. So there will be plenty of both of us.
Yeah, exactly. So, all right, back to the topic at hand here. Will Levis's ceiling. I think we should approach it the same way. Let's start with the ceiling from a statistical perspective, and then we'll talk about how we get there. So Joe Burrow's best seasons in the NFL so far, 2021 and 2022. These years, the Bengals offense was humming at a very high level. Passing yards, 4,400 in 2021, 4,240 in 2022. Completion percentage above 68.5% in both seasons. Yards per attempt, 8.7 in 2021, 7.4 in 2022. Obviously, adding Jamar Chase in 2021 made the offense take a big jump from 2020 to 2021. Titans with similar, additions at the wide receiver position this season, adding Calvin Ridley to sort of be their Jamar Chase, older DeAndre Hopkins to be sort of an older version of T. Higgins, and Tyler Boyd will literally be Tyler Boyd because it's the same slot receiver in both offenses. Granted, he is also a few years older than he was in 2021, but those are big numbers. I mean, that is Pro Bowl level numbers. That is one of the top passing offense in the league type of numbers. And I do think that is the ceiling for Will Levis this year, is a 4,500, 30 touchdown type of season, which he could totally have if he takes the steps that we just talked about, that we're concerned about. And I think if he takes 1 or 2 of the 3 or 4 steps we just talked about, he can reach this level. If he's a guy that consistently has a high turnover worthy throw rate, and sometimes he gets lucky and the interceptions get dropped, and then other times he gets unlucky and a deflected ball ends up being an interception, whatever. If he throws 15, 18 interceptions and is in the top 5 of the league in that category, it's not ideal. It's something he can learn from going from his second to third year in the league after this season. But I think the Titans can still have a very productive offense if he has a high turnover rate. Conversely, I think the Titans can have a productive offense if he takes too many sacks, but isn't turning the ball over a lot. He can't do both. He can't take a lot of sacks, turn the ball over a lot, be inaccurate, and make bad decisions. Like, obviously, we know he can't do all those things. But if his decision-making takes a small step forward, his ability to evade sacks takes a small step forward. He goes from a 9% sack rate to a 7.5%, 8% sack rate. Even that small jump will help. He could do those things and still have high turnovers, or vice versa, right? So I think that while we're talking about the ceiling, he just takes a few little steps forward, sets the table for himself to continue to improve throughout his career. He's only a second-year player after all. And before I turn it back over to you, Justin, I'm going to just use an example here because we've talked a lot about similarities between Josh Allen's physical attributes and Will Levis's physical attributes. Now, not necessarily talking about their production or their performance on the field, because it's still a very lofty comparison to give Will Levis to say that he could be as good as Josh Allen. So I don't want to go that far, but I do want to use the statistical jumps that Josh Allen made from his first to second year and from his second to third year as sort of a comparison to see, like, how much better can a rookie quarterback get who flashed potential at times, but also has these concerns that we're still worried about. In his rookie season, Josh Allen started 11 games. He threw 10 touchdowns and 12 interceptions, so much worse touchdown-interception ratio than what Will Levis had in his rookie season, even though he played less games. Josh Allen had a touchdown percentage of 3.1%. That means 3.1% of his pass attempts went for touchdowns in 2018, his rookie year. That jumped to 4.3% in 2019. He started every game that season. His touchdowns went from 10 to 20. And in 5 more starts in 2019 than 2018, he threw 3 fewer interceptions. His completion percentage jumped from 52% to 58%. His yards per attempt stayed about even, 6.5 to 6.7. The real jump for Josh Allen happened between his second year and his third year. So I think we can manage some expectations for Will Levis this season and say, we need to see more of the flashes we saw last year, fewer of the inconsistency that we saw last year, but we don't need to see him put it all together this season, because from 2019 to 2020, Josh Allen went from a 4.3 touchdown percentage to 6.5%. 6.5% of his attempts went for touchdowns. He threw 37 touchdowns that year and just 10 interceptions. His interception percentage dropped again. It was 3.8 in 2018, 2.0 in 2019, 1.7 in 2020. His yards per attempt took a huge jump from 6.7 to 7.9, and his completion percentage went from 58.8, which is about where Will Levis was last year, like you said, worst in the league among qualified starters, to 69.2 completion percentage. So what's interesting to me about this, what I just said, is that maybe we, keep our expectations a little low for this season, hope to see some of those flashes, and then in his third year, he really takes off. The other way to look at this is Will Levis's numbers as a rookie were closer to Josh Allen's numbers as a sophomore in the league. And if the jump we saw from Josh Allen's sophomore year to junior year takes place for Will Levis going into his second year, then the Titans are going to be one of the best teams in the league. I mean, obviously, if he throws 37 freaking touchdowns to 10 interceptions and he passes for 4,544 yards, obviously the Titans are going to be a very good offense if that happens. But I think just looking at it from like a comparison standpoint and keeping expectations in check, that is the ceiling. The ceiling is very high. A 4,500-yard season is probably the ceiling. I don't think he reaches that ceiling this year. I think we see steady improvement. He's going to have some good games, he's going to have some bad games, but overall for the course of the season, it's going to be a little better than what we saw last year. And then we can really let our expectations run wild heading into his third season. But he has to get there. He has to prove that he still deserves the chance to be the starter next year throughout the course of 2024.
It's funny when you said he could still have a high turnover play rate and have a productive year. The Titans have a great offense. You hadn't said his name yet. My mind went straight to Josh Allen because I'm like, that's true because Josh Allen has a high turnover worthy play rate every single season. And he's thrown a lot of interceptions in recent seasons, at least, I believe. And the Bills still have an explosive offense. So that's where my mind went. And this isn't a Bills podcast, so I'm going to get off this topic quickly. But you talk about the strides Josh Allen made on the field. I've said this on this show before, but it's probably been years, so you won't remember unless you're a super loyal listener. My good friend Joe Marino down there in Buffalo says this all the time. He hated the Josh Allen pick. I rub it in his face all the time. Do you know where Josh Allen made the biggest strides? And it was what the Bills media and all the analysts that hated the pick didn't account for. It was off the field, because Josh Allen is a relentless worker and he loves the game of football. That's what people didn't account for when he made the jump that they didn't see him making. And by all accounts, Will Levis is a psycho that loves football and that is putting in the work to get there. I think those are very important comparisons that probably go unmentioned when we're talking about the two of them. I love that you gave all the statistical analysis. This is the ceiling. Again, I'm so disinterested in that, because if he does what he's supposed to do, then he's going to get there. So you know what my ceiling for Will Levis is, completely ignoring stats and numbers and all that? Yeah. My ceiling is something you kind of touched on, but it's seeing somewhat of a more reined-in version of Will Levis this season, right? It's learning to play within the structure of Brian Callahan's offense. That will bring the turnover-worthy play rate down. That will bring the ADOT down. That will do a better job taking what the defense gives them. That will be playing to Brian Callahan and Nick Holtz's offense. That will be not overlooking the wide-open guy in the flat, because he's got a hero ball scenario in his mind where there's a receiver deep down the field. That's what I want to see. Now, let me make this clear, though, and I'm going to put this in Titans terms, okay? Give me Will Levis every day of the week, and don't give me Marcus Mariota. And I think you know exactly what I mean by that. Give me the aggressive quarterback that needs to be taught how to play within structure and take what the defense gives him on occasion. And don't give me the super uber timid quarterback that can't learn how to be aggressive, because I believe that person cannot learn how to be an aggressive quarterback. But the aggressive quarterback can learn how to rein some of that in. Right? We know Will Levis has all the physical traits. We know about the release is super special. We know about the size. We know about the arm strength. We know about the playmaking ability. Heck, we know about the athleticism, I think, to escape the pocket on occasion when necessary. What we now need to see is the mature quarterback that is willing to play within Brian Callahan's offense. Because we all love the coaching staff, right? We all love the offense that's being installed. We all love the receivers. So what we want to see is Will Levis trust all of those things that have been put in place around him, and save the freelancing, save the hero ball, save the 11.1 average depth of target for situations that call for it. It doesn't have to be a down-by-down situation. It shouldn't be a live by the sword, die by the sword on every single play, which at times it felt like it was, right, in 2023, as exciting and as much as we loved it. That's my improved version of Will Levis. It is a guy that is still Will Levis, but a more mature, reined-in version of him that learns how to play within structure.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that is what we need to see from him to feel confident moving forward. And if the Titans are competitive for a playoff spot, if they're in the mix for the AFC South in weeks 14, 15, 16, even if they're eliminated from playoff contention by week 17, but they were in it for the 3 weeks up to that, and then they're playing week 18 for nothing. Like, as long as we see some improvement towards the competitive team, I will consider 2024 a successful season. If they are bottom of the barrel, if they have 4 or 5 wins this year and they're really not in the mix for the playoffs, then I think we have to reevaluate what we think of this Titans roster, of the coaching staff. Like, everyone's going to come in under scrutiny, but especially Will Levis. So again, I don't need to see the 4,500 yard, 35 touchdown season this year. I don't need to see the 10, 12 win season this year. I need to see steady progress towards that team, being a real contender in 2025, because there's timeline reasons for that. DeAndre Hopkins' age, even Calvin Ridley, Tyler Boyd are very, up there in terms of their age compared to, I guess the best way to say it is the Titans' top 3 receivers is the oldest average age of a top 3 receiver core in the league right now. So that's one area where, like, you have a little bit of time, but you don't have a ton of time to see if Will Levis is the guy. So steady improvement for 2024, real contender status in 2025, where DeAndre Hopkins may or may not even be on the team by then. But if not, then you hope to replace him with T. Higgins in free agency, a draft pick, first or second round next season. But yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the comparison to Josh Allen in terms of the work ethic and the off the field like dedication, because we've seen a little bit of that from Will Levis. And obviously during this time of year, everything is hope by like optimism at the highest level. But Will Levis working out in Cabo with his receivers, what we saw on social media posted earlier, I guess last week, that was pretty cool to see. I mean, most quarterbacks this time of year are getting together with their pass catchers and throwing around and working out, so it's not like it's abnormal, but it's good to see that he organized this trip to Cabo where it's not only about getting on the field and working out. Like if they were all still in Nashville and they were meeting up for 2 or 3 hours a day, that's a totally different experience in terms of bonding, chemistry, team building than like taking a trip together, staying in a hotel together, going out and throwing the ball around the field and then going and lifting together, going to dinner together. Like they're really building that chemistry right now that I think is super important. And Will Levis is leading the charge on that. And on top of all that, what we've heard from Brian Callahan in, I think, 3 separate big interviews that he's done. He was on Bussin' with the Boys. He was on Robert May's show. He did one other thing that's not coming to mind right now, but he's talked a lot about how confident him and Amy Adams-Strunk and the whole Titans front office is in Will Levis, how confident they are that it's important to make sure he knows he's the guy going into this season, not to like fool around with a fake camp competition for the starting job. Let him take the reins and run with it. His input in the offense itself, learning what he likes and what he's not so great at or what he doesn't like to do. All these things are going to help. So I do think there is a chance that Will Levis reaches the ceiling this year. I think realistically, we're looking at, if I'm going to go back to statistics, which I know you are not interested in at all, but some people out there might be. I think we're looking at a 35 to 3,800 yard season. I think there's an outside chance he becomes the first Titans quarterback to throw for 4,000 yards in the Titans era. I think he could get up close to 30 touchdowns depending on, the Titans' main philosophy in the red zone. Are they going to throw the ball? Or are they going to run the ball? For the last 7-8 years, it's been, we get to the red zone, we run the ball because we have Derrick Henry in the backfield. Is that going to change now that Derrick Henry's gone? Are they going to let Will Levis throw the ball a little more in the red zone, which will lead to some easier touchdowns and those numbers get boosted? I think that's what we're looking at this season. And I would expect the Titans to be in contention for the division heading down the stretch of the season. So that's where I'm expecting it to be. When we talk about ceiling and floor, we've gone over it pretty detailed now, but where do you actually expect Will Levis to end up relative to that floor, relative to that ceiling? If 0 is the floor and 10 is the ceiling, where are you slotting Will Levis, your expectations for him in 2024?
I'm at like a 7. I've got high expectations for him. I like the 4,000 yard call out. I think he'll be right around there, 3,800, 39, 41, 40, whatever. Within about 400 yards of that is what I'm expecting, 38 to 400, 4,200 passing yards. I'd like to think he's at 25 passing touchdowns, 26 passing touchdowns, keep the interceptions to like 8 to 10 or something along those lines. You know what I mean? Give me a 3,925 touchdown, 9-10 interception season, and I'd be very satisfied. Now, I'm high on Brian Callahan. I'm super high on the trio of receivers. I'm high on the offense. I think the offensive line should be good enough to get by and produce those type of numbers. And mind you, I'll go back, and I guess it's too early to take a victory lap, but why wouldn't I be high on Will Levis? I was high on him as a prospect when not a lot of people liked him. I liked him coming out of Kentucky. I'll say the same things I said about him coming out. I see a big, strong-armed, athletic quarterback that ran a pro-style offense that can make big plays outside of structure. Those are things I really like in a starting quarterback. He showed it at Kentucky. He showed it as a rookie with the Titans. I just got to see, again, some of it to be reined in a little bit, but I've always been high on Will Levis coming out of the draft to now. So I'm not going to change it after I saw a lot of promising signs, through his play as a rookie. So I'm going with the 7. I'm high on Will Levis, especially high on what he can do in this offense.
Yeah, I agree. And I am high too. So I'm expecting big things this year. Is he draftable in fantasy to you?
I might take him in the last round if I need a QB2. Right. I don't know. But I will say he's not as low as he. I think I checked Fantasy Pros the other day. Where was he? Like QB 25, 26. Like I'm not going that low on him.
No, I think that he's being underrated as a fantasy player because, look, he could be terrible, but the upside in Brian Callahan's offense to produce big time numbers with this trio of weapons with a pass heavy approach
And he's
high.
probably going to run for a couple touchdowns too.
Yeah, I would expect that too. So, all right, I think that covers it. Justin, ceiling and floor for Will Levis here. I will end this with just going back to my 2024 stat projections, because to me, this was like a very calculated approach to it. My stat projections with run rate, pass rate, interception percentage, touchdown percentage, yards per attempt, completion percentage, all those things like factored into a very intense calculation. My floor based on those projections was 3,584 yards, so 3,500 yards, 23 touchdowns, 14 interceptions. And my ceiling for him there was 4,399 yards, so just about 4,400 yards, 36 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. My realistic projection for him, 3,977 yards, so just under 4,000 passing yards, 30 touchdowns, 12 interceptions. Would you be satisfied with a 3,900 yard, 30 touchdown, 12 interception season? Interceptions a little higher than what you had said, so just want to clarify.
I would. 30 touchdowns would be outstanding. I don't know why I'm falling in like the 25 to 27 range as being my realistic expectation. A 30 touchdown season. And by the way, if they're at 3,977 passing yards, I'm going to be pissed at someone because, God damn it, they know they've never had a 4,000 yard passer. You got to get them there at that point, right?
Get him 23 more yards, for goodness sake. Call a screen until you get it. All right, that will do it for this one. Thanks to everyone again for tuning in. Let us know in the comments what your anticipated ceiling and floor for Will Levis is this season, and let us know what your realistic expectation is too. That's 3 comments from everyone who watches this on YouTube. We should be at, hundreds of comments if that actually comes to fruition. But no, we appreciate you guys. We really appreciate all the boosting the algorithm comments, the tighten up comments, anything to just get that conversation going. And reminder, if you ask us questions or suggest topics for podcasts, we'll respond to you, and we might even do a podcast based around your topic or question. So leave those down there below. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel, give this video a thumbs up, like, and turn on channel notifications so you get an alert every time we drop a new video. Thanks also to our sponsors, Sinkers Beverages in East Nashville and Bluegrass Beverages in Hendersonville. Like I said before, head to the sinkersbeverages.com website or check the link in this podcast description to join the In Crowd. In Crowd members get access to allocated wines and spirits, exclusive events, early access to barrel releases, and more. Plus, Sinkers Beverages is on Uber Eats. So if you are too strapped for time or just a little too lazy to get out to the store, search Sinkers Beverages on Uber Eats and have everything you need delivered right to your front door. All right, Justin, that'll do it for this one. We will be back soon, possibly with a special guest interview. Is that something I should tease, or is it potentially going to fall through so I shouldn't tease it? What do you think?
Well, we'll see, but it's looking very likely like we're going to have a legendary Titan on our next episode. It's looking that way, so fingers crossed, but you guys will enjoy that one, I think.
So if our next episode comes out and it is not an interview, it fell through, but hopefully it will not fall through and you all have something to be excited about. So that'll do it until we return with that hopefully interview. You all stay safe out there and tighten up.
A Broadway sports media production.